thing. I've had various beliefs about what procrastination is, what causes it. There's all kinds of you're making your life difficult on purpose out of some sort of either martyr thing, or you don't feel good about yourself, and this helps reinforce the fact that you're an F up by putting these things off and putting yourself in a crunch. I don't know if any of that's true or not.
I think it was a total depression, anxiety thing.
It's
for
not.
me.
It's not laziness, though. I don't think it's that. I think it's a weirder psychological thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also learned, definitely over the years, if you get on a roll with something, take that as long as you can. You know how you can get on a cleaning roll and then all of a sudden it's effortless. It's like I'm cleaning and I couldn't. It'd be hard to stop me. Don't stop. Go until you're like your hands are bloody or something. I mean, because it may not come again for a very, very long time.
You can't stand up straight. Keep mopping.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I'm not in the mood to clean, it just seems like, oh my God, the idea of doing anything sounds impossible. We have a new T-shirt. Hot dogs are dogs. It's our best trans-related T-shirt. Flying off the shelves. Go to ArmstrongandGetty.com. Hot dogs are dogs. It looks really, really cool.
Armstrong and Getty.
Now, the big wireless companies want to limit you to two choices when it comes to data, unlimited or unlimited. And guess what? Both are stupidly expensive. Now, stop overpaying for data that you're never, ever going to use. That's like paying for a pot of coffee when all you need is a cup, or filling your entire truck bed full of gas when you only need a tank. Now, with Pure Talk, my cell phone company, you get to choose how much data that you actually want and need. And for example, for $25 a month, you'll get unlimited talk and text, 5 gigs of data, which is more than enough, and they'll include mobile hotspot and roaming in 50-plus countries. Stop overpaying for wireless. Get America's best 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Just dial pound 250, say the keywords, and do it now. You'll save an additional 50% off your first month. The switch is simple, fast, and easy. No contract to sign, no activation fee, and you keep your phone and your phone number. Pound 250, keyword. Save now the same service for much less, for about half from Pure.
Online at myclallamcounty.com. Newsradio KONP, Port Angeles, Squim, a Radio Pacific station. We're the talk of the peninsula. News Radio KONP, Port Angeles, Squim, FM.
A Senate showdown right now on Cairo 7. The sitting senator squares off against the doctor. Your money, your safety, and your health. The candidates taking your biggest questions as we fight for the answers you deserve. Will Senator Maria Cantwell earn a 5th term, or will Dr. Raul Garcia swing the seat? Cairo 7's U.S. Senate debate starts right now. And we are welcoming both candidates to the stage. Senator Maria Cantwell, Dr. Raul Garcia, thank you so much for both being here today. And thank you at home for joining us. I am your moderator, Monique Minglavin. And today, with the help of some great questions from you, we will be addressing the biggest issues facing our state. And you're in for a spirited debate today, so let's meet our candidates. First, the incumbent, Senator Maria Cantwell from Edmonds. The Democrat has held public office for more than 30 years, including as U.S. Senator for Washington since 2001. She has also worked in the private tech sector in Washington. Now her challenger is Republican Dr. Raul Garcia. Dr. Garcia is originally from Cuba and now lives in Yakima. He has worked as a physician for 26 years and is the medical director at Astria Toppenish Hospital. Dr. Garcia has not yet held an elected office, but he has years of community service. Now, both candidates have agreed to rules for this debate. There will be no opening statements, but they will have time at the end for closing statements. And you at home will hear pre-recorded questions directly from Washingtonians. I will also ask questions formulated with help from the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political group that neither opposes nor endorses candidates or political parties. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question. Now, candidates may call for a 30-second rebuttal once during the debate. My primary role is to ensure the questions are answered and to ask follow-up or clarifying questions as needed. And 30 seconds will also be given to respond to those. Now, Dr. Garcia won a coin toss before the debate. He opted to go second. So Senator Cantwell will go first, and we'll alternate from there. And let's get started with a basic but important question. Why do you believe you are the best candidate to represent the people of Washington in the U.S. Senate? Senator Cantwell, you first.
Well, thank you, Monique, for that question. And thank you to Cairo. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Thank you to Dr. Garcia. I'm here to ask the Washingtonians that I know and love so much for ability to continue to fight for us. I went to Washington not to argue with my colleagues, not to get on cable TV at night, but to get things done. And we passed 3 major bills. The Inflation Reduction Act, which basically helped put a cap on prescription drug prices, both for out-of-pockets for seniors and at $35. It got us negotiated rates that is helping us save money. Just like when you buy at Costco, you get a discount. We deserve in the Medicare budget to get that discount too. We passed an infrastructure bill that helped us build the West Seattle Bridge, and it's helping us get light rail to Snohomish County. And it's done so many other things. And we also passed the CHIPS and Science Act so we could bring our supply chain home, increase jobs here in the state of Washington, and drive down costs. That is so important. So I want to continue that work because we have created so many jobs. We have seen them in our Northwest economy. But what we need to do now is train and skill people for the jobs of tomorrow that are here today. I want to fight for those apprenticeships, increase wages, and lower costs.
Thank you very much, Senator. Dr. Garcia, why do you believe you are the best candidate to represent our state in the Senate?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Raul Garcia, and I'm here to be our next U.S. Senator to represent the people of Washington. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and Cairo 7 for putting this debate together. I especially want to thank Senator Cantwell for being here and recognize 24 years representing the United States of America. You know, public service is not easy. And as I say that, I want to thank my wife for her support. Without her, I wouldn't be here today. But mainly, I want to thank you, the viewers, who care enough to view this debate and care about our future. Tenemos una linda oportunidad de elegir el primer senador nacional latinoamericano en la historia de Washington. Quiero representar nuestra cultura, nuestros ideales, pero principalmente asegurar el futuro de nuestros niños. I hope that everybody watching this debate will see a contrast and a choice, not from a career politician with polished answers, but from an immigrant that fought hard for the American dream, was lucky enough to become a doctor, a medical leader, a professor, a dean, a medical director, a business owner, but more importantly, a father and a husband and a scientist that would look at all our problems and bring science into politics and, according to results, come out with solutions that are effective.
Thank you. Gracias to you both for that opening question. And now we're going to turn to the cost of living. Washingtonians are struggling with a rising cost of living. The basic necessities, including food, housing, gas. Inflation in Washington state has consistently outpaced the national average. One example here, grocery prices up by over 7% in the past 2 years. So here's the question. What specific measures would you support to address inflation? Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Monique. Well, we are in a bad situation. We have had numerous families now go to food banks to get food because they can't afford it. They put their groceries on credit cards. You know, I have 4 children that put gas in their car every month, and eventually they call me to see if I could help them out. We need true answers, and disinflation has been a result of largely government spending. I think that we need to cut our government spending and think that we need to audit our federal government and see what programs are effective and what programs are ineffective. And those ineffective programs turn into money that we could bring back to our communities so we could have more money. And Economics 101 tells us that if we have more money in our pockets, we spend more money in our communities, and then growth happens. You know, Senator Cantwell talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, but unfortunately, that has proven to not lower inflation. As a matter of fact, it has raised it. And academicians all over the country have said that this was not going to be good and continue to say that the results of the Inflation Reduction Act, especially for the state of Washington, we have been the piggy bank for the rest of the country. That means that we have put more taxes into it than we have rewarded from that IRA. So better solutions need to happen. We deserve better.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Senator Cantwell, what specific measures would you support to address inflation?
Well, thank you, Monique. It's so important because we had a global pandemic and obviously the situation in Ukraine that affected all sorts of prices. So first and foremost, it was to get through the pandemic and, as I said earlier, bring the supply chain back to the United States and lower costs. But right now, we've gone from 9% inflation down to 2.5% today, but it's still not enough. We need to see lower prices. When a Kroger executive says that he knows that he raised grocery prices above the rate of inflation, that is just not right. So I am opposing the Kroger merger because the Kroger-Albertson merger will give less choice and increase costs. Secondly, I believe in building more affordable housing. For every 2,000 units that get built in a city, that lowers the annual rent by about $2,000 for those individuals. So building more supply will also help us because housing is still one of the stingiest aspects. And I also believe in giving more people access to lower prescription drug costs. This notion that we now got a cap on insulin at $35 for seniors is something that everybody on insulin deserves to have. And certainly being able to negotiate on drug prices and these PBM middlemen who are basically taking money out of our pharmacies like Kelly Ross Pharmacy here that actually had to close because of PBMs and their clawbacks. We need to stop that, and I have a bill in the Senate to do so.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. We're going to move on to public safety right now because this remains a top concern for Washingtonians. Violent crime in our state decreased by 4.8% from 2022 to 2023, but it remains more than 23% higher than in 2019 before the pandemic. Now, that outpaces the national average, and the drug crisis, particularly fentanyl, contributes significantly to crime. So what would you do as senator to address public safety? Senator Cantwell.
Well, thank you, Monique. First of all, fentanyl is a scourge on our society, and we passed a law, the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, to make it an emergency nationally. That is giving us more resources here in Seattle to fight this pandemic, and we also are this crisis that we have. We also are helping with law enforcement what they've requested, new technologies to detect the vapors of fentanyl so we can detect it sooner. But I believe in putting more community police into our communities. The notion that we have put 136,000 policemen from the federal level to help places like Seattle or to help Tacoma or to help Spokane is a critical part of helping the local law enforcement in their communities. It's important because the community policing is about knowing your community and helping stop that crime. In Bellevue, where they've had a full fleet of officers and these community programs, they've had more success at fighting this. I think we should learn a little bit from what the mayor of Bellevue has done.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Dr. Garcia, what would you do as senator to address public safety?
Well, public safety, as I've traveled around the state, is the number one thing on everybody's mind. You know, we all have children, and we want them to be safe when they're out there playing. Our streets aren't safe. And I think that we need to change the culture to reinforce our support for law enforcement. Seattle itself is 375 policemen under. We can't take the 911 calls and be there on time if we do that. Second, we need to revive the community relationship between law enforcement and businesses. When we had that, we knew who didn't belong in our streets. But most importantly, we need to start prosecuting small crime again. Small crime leads to bigger crime, and this is what our permissive society so far has done to our city here in Seattle and to our state, and truthfully to our country. When it comes to fentanyl, there is no bigger crisis in America A human being is dying every 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I walked 185 miles from Toppenish Hospital to Seattle to bring awareness to this crisis and to honor everybody that has died from this senseless death. That's why I'm proposing the Americans Against Fentanyl Act, which will give manslaughter charges to drug dealers and put them in prison, and give involuntary mandatory rehab to addicts. I could tell you as a physician that their brains is telling them to lie, cheat, and steal to get that next fix, and we need to take them out of that environment.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Let me get back to you on this matter, Senator Cantwell. You mentioned community police in particular. That is seen a local resource. How would you be able to influence that as U.S. Senator?
Community policing, so that is something that we do as part of the COPS program. The COPS program, very successful effort by the federal government to help supplement what communities need as far as resources. It can be for training, it can be for skilling, and it can be for just hiring officers. It is shown in research that if you increase the capacity by 3%, then you actually lower the crime rate by 3.5%. So helping our local communities from the federal government is something I support. This was in the American Rescue Plan. It helped us, and I'll continue to support these kind of resources for Seattle and the greater cities around.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. And Dr. Garcia, let me ask you a little bit more about your idea of involuntary commitment there. Now, the process of confining someone is generally governed by state law. So how would you, as senator, influence that? You have 30 seconds.
Well, you know, I've moved to Seattle to be in the streets with the addicts, with the people affected by a program, by the problem. I have a fundamental belief that to find a true solution, you have to dive into the culture of people that are affected by it. And they all have come out and said, thank you for making that decision for me when I couldn't make it for myself. We need to take them out of that environment because their brain is not going to volunteer that to bring them into a rehabilitation facility that is comprehensive, that includes mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I'm sorry you're out of time here.
Yeah.
We are going to turn now to housing. We touched on it briefly, but we're going deeper here. The price for home ownership remains out of reach for many low and middle class families in Washington. According to Redfin, the median home price in our state is up more than 52% from 2020. Now, with that as the backdrop, here is a question from viewer Ryan Donahue from Renton.
What specific policies would you advocate for to increase the availability of affordable home ownership?
Now, if you were unable to hear that question, Ryan said, what specific policies would you advocate for to increase the availability of affordable home ownership? Dr. Garcia.
Well, unfortunately, housing is a big issue in our state, and one that we should pay very close attention to and give more resources to. Now, this is largely a state issue, but the federal government, we spend a lot of money helping states with housing. My wife was a product of affordable housing, and I remember, you know, when I got here from Cuba, my mother and I lived in an apartment that is half the size of this studio, that we paid $110 a month. She lived in that apartment for 24 years until I graduated from a residency and was able to buy her a home. And I remember the picture of her face when she came into her new home. What our friend is asking us is about being able to have that affordability to buy a home. And I want to come up with something that, according to results, bringing science into politics, has worked. VA loans have worked because veterans don't have to come up with a down payment to buy a house. I want to turn that into the regular public. Let's have programs with our lenders that our regular citizens could afford to buy a house without a down payment. They still have to qualify, but in our economy today, it's very hard to come up with a down payment. The other idea is zero-based regulations. Let's start building more homes with less obstacles so we could find a true solution.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Senator Cantwell, Ryan's question to you again. What specific policies would you advocate for to increase the availability of affordable home ownership?
Well, thank you. This crisis that we have in the inflation rate impacting housing is that we haven't built enough supply. We need to build more affordable housing across the United States of America. I had a sheriff in Eastern Washington tell me he tried to hire a deputy who accepted the job, but then basically called back and said, even in my rural county, I can't afford to live there. So I am the leader in the United States Senate with a Republican colleague, Todd Young of Indiana, to increase the capacity of the affordable low-income housing tax credit. This tax credit is 95% of the affordable housing that gets built with this tax credit. Yesterday, I was at a site, Madrona Heights in Edmonds, Washington, that was the opening of an affordable project just like this. And what was it doing? It was providing workforce and previous homeless people housing. There's a grocery store right across the street. They came over and said, can I hire some of these people because we need a workforce with the holidays coming up. So building capacity is important. We can't have firefighters and police officers and nurses traveling 3 counties away just to have affordable housing. We need to build more supply. So unfortunately, this bill got stopped by some of my Republican colleagues. When we go back in the lame duck, I hope that we will get it over the goal line. We need to have a significant increase to build thousands of new units in the state of Washington.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Dr. Garcia, let me ask you a little bit about the impediments to building that you referenced. Are you talking about zoning, or what are you referring to that you as U.S. Senator could influence? 30 seconds, please.
Well, I have a lot of contractor friends that want to build, but they say permits are multiple. The time that it takes for them to try and build is excessive. The regulations are not about safety of housing. There are other regulations that don't pertain to fast access to building these affordable housings. And truly, they tell me, when we finish with it, it's not affordable because of all the regulations that we have had to follow.
I'm sorry, you're out of time there.
Yeah.
Senator Cantwell, my follow-up for you. You reference legislation that has failed. If it's failed in the past, how can you bring this across the finish line?
Well, I actually was successful in getting a bump to this program in 2018, and it lasted for about 4 years. I wanted it to continue because we needed to build more supply. But even that little bit of supply helped us in the state of Washington add additional projects. So now what I'm trying to do is raise the voices. AARP is supporting my legislation. So they are one of those voices that is saying, let's get this over the goal line and hold members accountable.
Thank you, Senator. Our next topic is health care, and Robin from Silverdale wrote to us, concerned about what she calls health care deserts.
Kitsap County is now considered a healthcare desert, in large part due to the downsizing of Naval Hospital Bremerton. It can take over a year to see some providers in our area.
Well, again, if you were unable to hear, Robin said Kitsap County is now considered a healthcare desert in a large part due to the downsizing of Naval Hospital Bremerton, and it can take a year to see some providers in our area. So adding to that right now, the average American's healthcare costs in 2023 totaled $12,900. That is up from 2019 when it was $11,500. Now, higher costs for hospital care, prescription drugs, and insurance premiums are factors. So what action would you take to make health care more affordable and accessible for someone like Robin in Kitsap County? Senator Cantwell.
We need to make health care more affordable. It's going to be a continued task. But obviously, we focused on prescription drugs right away, and we need to build more capacity for primary care physicians. And this is one of the reasons why the Affordable Care Act was so important to do. The Affordable Care Act increased capacity to see more people at clinics and to give them access in different ways than just, a hospital facility. So now what we need to do is continue to drive down the cost, as I was mentioning, on healthcare, because part of our whole healthcare system is the enormous amount that goes to prescription drugs that PBMs and others are driving huge costs on. But I believe in giving more access, besides growing more primary care physicians, with the University of Washington as a lead in the nation in, so giving them more resources to train and skill people, to also increase access to telehealth and telemedicine. It's not the only solution for the person who just asked in Kitsap County, but it is the answer for driving down cost overall in health care. So I want to bolster what we've done in the Affordable Care Act, and extend more cost-effective insurance to those individuals and get more coverage. I remember being in Kitsap County, and the hospital told me there, sometimes one person visiting the hospital on a repeated basis because they didn't have insurance ended up costing that hospital hundreds of thousands of dollars of uncompensated care. So let's get everybody covered in our state.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Garcia, what action would you take to make health care more affordable and accessible?
Well, healthcare is somewhere that we can do better. You know, I'm an emergency physician, and I've been at the other end of holding patients because we don't have medical beds in the state of Washington. And what has happened in our country is that healthcare is no longer controlled by physicians and patients. They're controlled by insurance companies. And to that, we need some better solutions. I propose that we deregulate some rules so a citizen of Washington could actually get a quote from any state in the country for insurance, that way lowering their cost and bringing more power to their hands. I also don't know that insurance companies, although I believe in free enterprise and that they can make money, that they should be on Wall Street answering to investors instead of the patients that need an MRI or another study and are being denied. But healthcare deserts is a real thing. You know, OBGYN has had many closures over the past few years and truly under Senator Cantwell's watch. And the women of Washington need health care. We're not talking about the issues of autoimmune disease and perimenopause and cancer and all these things that are popping up in women's health care now, and we don't have the OBGYN facilities to provide that care. Mental health is another health care desert. I was in Everton, Washington, with the first urgent care for mental health for children. That is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I actually heard an answer from either of you to the second part of Robin's question, which was, what would you do to address these healthcare deserts specifically?
So there is a bill in the United States Senate that myself, Senator Wyden, is the lead on, that is trying to fight to make sure that we give more access and more cost reimbursements to these facilities. We need to have rural health care. We need to have capacity for that, and this would help stabilize it. But I do think, I don't have time in 30 seconds, but maybe you can ask me a follow-up. But there are some strategies that some of our other counties have deployed, pooling the physicians together across the county that have allowed them to help keep the care within the community.
Thank you very much, Senator. Dr. Garcia, how would you address the healthcare deserts?
Well, Monique, in 2008, I visited Senator Cantwell, and I warned her that lower reimbursements from our government would make us lose services in Washington State. And her response was that we were going to bring all the other reimbursements down to our level. And certainly that has not worked out. What I propose is for Congress to open up the critical access designation for these rural hospitals to be able to have better reimbursement, and they could afford all these services and then bring those services to the community.
Thank you both very much.
I want to just follow up on this because this is an important point.
Each one of you, just so the people at home understand, each of you has the opportunity to have one more 30-second rebuttal. You're exercising.
So my opponent has said he thought the Affordable Care Act failed. And it obviously increased capacity across the state of Washington, not just in covering more people on insurance, but helping those facilities, those critical access hospitals, and creating clinic access to people who didn't have care. So what we're trying to do now, and the University of Washington is the lead on this, they actually have an innovation grant that basically is saying, how do we help pool the resources of physicians, get people to work collaboratively together, increase the access and reimbursement to telehealth, and reward them with a value, and that's a higher reward.
That's your 30 seconds, and we're going to move on unless you were going to exercise your rebuttal as well. Okay, so we are switching now to women's reproductive rights. In the last 2 years, the landscape has drastically changed across the U.S. following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. 13 states have now banned abortion access. That includes our neighbor, Idaho. Now, meanwhile, an Associated Press poll in June found 70% of Americans think abortion should be legal in most cases. A viewer named Gilda submitted this question for you. As a senator from Washington State, what do you believe is the state's role in protecting women's reproductive care? And will you support national legislation to safeguard reproductive rights, including a woman's right to choose? Dr. Garcia.
Well, the short answer is yes. We live in Washington State, and the voters of Washington State have made it very clear that this is a pro-choice state. And as your next United States Senator, I am going to protect and defend that choice. I know the Dobbs decision has caused a lot of anxiety and mistrust in our government. And I'm asking every woman in the state of Washington to trust who I am and what I have stood for. I am the physician that has prescribed contraceptives. I'm the physician that has been there at bedside when a mother had her daughter raped by her uncle. A husband had his wife almost dying of an ectopic pregnancy, a fetal demise, or other OB emergencies, that we have to send those patients to the operating room to terminate that pregnancy, or those women will die. My wife was a trauma nurse that is specialized in sexual assault. I have a long career where I would never handicap the medical profession from performing procedures that are life savings. So the long answer is yes. I think there should be a safety net all over our country for those women that choose to have an abortion to do so. The Dobbs decision has caused a burden on Washington, bringing other patients to our health care to provide those procedures, because those states don't.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Senator Cantwell, what do you believe is the state's role in protecting women's reproductive care, and will you support national legislation to safeguard reproductive rights, including a woman's right to choose?
I think a woman's right to choose is a constitutional right to privacy. I would hope all Washingtonians would view this as an issue of our freedom. This should be a decision between a woman and her physician, not a politician, not somebody in government. My opponent will definitely go cast a vote for a Republican leader, and their agenda in Washington is to stop Roe v. Wade. They, in fact, are often leaders in trying to stop even IVF. So what I want to do is go back to Washington and fight to codify Roe v. Wade into national law. While our state has passed this by initiative, we are now seeing the strains in our state of people coming from Idaho and other states just to get reproductive care. You might be coming from Idaho and you want to keep a child. In the complexity of your pregnancy, they don't want to see you, and they ask you to go to Seattle. That's not the way the United States of America should work. Reproductive choice should be the law of the land across the United States.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Garcia, your rebuttal there. You have 30 seconds to respond to what the senator just said.
Yes, I want to make sure that everyone is clear on my position, and whether we have a Republican leader or a Democrat leader, these are issues that affect our everyday family. You know, one of my mentors was Dan Evans, and Governor Evans said that he'd rather cross the aisle than cross the people of Washington. And that is my mentality. I'm going to do what's best for the people of Washington. I'm going to represent their ideals, and in this case, is to uphold and protect that pro-choice status that our state is.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Garcia. We're going to move to immigration right now, a hot-button issue across the country. And we have a pretty straightforward question now from Susan Martin from San Juan Island.
Earlier this year, a comprehensive bipartisan bill on immigration and border security failed to pass in Congress. Would you support this bill if it comes up again?
Well, I know you'd like me to repeat this question. So Susan, again, she asked earlier this year, a comprehensive bipartisan bill on immigration and border security failed to pass in Congress. Would you support this bill if it came up again? Senator Cantwell.
Well, I did support this legislation. We do want to increase border security. It was a compromise. I have voted for, I think, 4 or 5 different compromises for border security, starting way back with Larry Craig, an Idaho senator, and Ted Kennedy. And so, once again, a very constructive bipartisan bill that would have put more resources into protecting our border got killed by Republicans who'd rather campaign on the issue than actually solve the issue. What's really important, I think, to Washingtonians is that we take care of our dreamers. that we have a comprehensive immigration law that allows people to come here and work and then return to their home country like so many people do from Mexico, and to make sure that we continue to focus on what is the right asylum laws, not, as President Trump tried to do, put kids in cages or separate families. This bill that was done by my colleague Senator Langford, a Republican from Oklahoma, and Senator Sinema, was a great idea to try to put this to rest and give the resources to the border. But Republicans chose to kill it. So that's why I want to make sure when we go back, we do take another attempt to get this over the goal line.
Okay, thank you, Senator Dr. Garcia. Earlier this year, a comprehensive bipartisan bill on immigration and border security failed to pass in Congress. Would you support this bill if it comes up again?
Well, I wasn't there for the bill and to study it, but I like the word bipartisan. You know, as I just said, I'm a Dan Evans Republican, and I think that the answers lie in the middle. And if we have a bipartisan bill for immigration, it would be hard not to vote for it. You know, I was an immigrant to this country. I could tell you about the night that I arrived in Miami, and there were a lot of people. They were at that airport to receive me. That fire that my mother had to come to this country is the fire that every immigrant that comes to this country has. Y quiero decirle a todos los inmigrantes que yo siempre los representaré. The Dreamers came to this country under 18, not to their fault that they broke the law, and I don't know why we haven't given them citizenship already. The other individuals that have been here that did break the law but have lived great lives here are our neighbors. We don't even know that they're illegal. We should have a path to legalization, maybe a permanent residency. And for those that break the law, no. You won't come to our country to break the law. I understand that Washington State relies a lot on our economy relies on immigrants. That's why I'm a big proponent of H-2B and H-2A workers, and I will always support immigrants in this country and be a champion of them.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Just to clarify here, Senator Cantwell, that bill came up for a vote again in May, and when it was divorced from some aid to Ukraine and some other matters, you lost some Democrats in that vote as well. But you were saying that you would stick with this bill as is if it were to come up again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's, I mean, we obviously have a legislative process, but yes, the core of this deal is to, again, have some normalization of our immigration process and put more resources on the border. And that's an important thing, to have a bipartisan bill, not have Republicans kill it because they'd rather talk about the issue than actually solve it.
Thank you. And Dr. Garcia, if it were bipartisan and supported by members of both parties, you would support?
I would support it. You know, every sovereign nation deserves the right to vet who comes in and out of their country. And when we lose that, we are no longer sovereign. The embarrassing point for our government today is that we don't know who's coming in and out of our country, but the cartels do know exactly who's coming in out of our country. We need some more discipline and leadership at that border, but again, support immigration 100%.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Now, we have covered a lot of ground so far, but we're going to take a quick break right now. We're addressing the climate crisis and efforts to keep your kids safe online. When we return, that's in about 2.5 minutes.
We're the talk of the peninsula. Newsradio KONP, Port Angeles Squim, FM 101.7 and 101.3, a Radio Pacific station.
For the Washington State News Network, I'm Rob Francis. The State Department of Agriculture has confirmed an outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza or bird flu in commercial poultry in Franklin County. Following reports of sudden deaths of chickens on October 11th, veterinarians began an investigation. The Animal Disease and Diagnostic Laboratory later confirmed the virus October 15th. Dr. Stephen Krager, the health officer for the Benton Franklin Health District, stated the public's risk remains low and health officials are monitoring poultry workers. Amazon Web Services investing over $500 million billion in small modular nuclear reactors to power its cloud expansion. Partnering with Energy Northwest, the advanced reactors will be constructed near existing power stations, offering a smaller footprint and faster build times. The investment is critical as demand for data centers grows, and studded tires will soon be legal again on Washington roads. Though unlawful for most of the year, the tires are permissible between November 1st and March 31st, according to WisDOT. They allow for better traction on snow or ice-covered roads, but there are other things to consider, according to spokesperson Lauren Loebsack.
Winter prep is knowing what the conditions are. Being prepared for that winter driving means proper traction tires, whether they be studded tires after November 1 or they be siped winter tires. When you're traveling into the mountain passes that chain requirements, you need to carry chains no matter what.
For more on these stories and others, download the WSNN mobile app. You can also visit our website, WashingtonStateNews.net.
This is McGruff the Crime Dog, and I need you to help me take a bite out of crime. Another teenager fell victim to fake pills. Smells like big crime that needs to be stopped. Where are these pills coming from, and how are kids getting them? Right from under our noses, crooks are targeting kids on social media and selling them counterfeit pills that could seal their fate with a click of a button. It may seem harmless, maybe it doesn't even seem like a drug deal, but it definitely is. So before buying pills online, think about this. Should buying prescription pills be that easy? Think these pills are tested and safe? Think they're the same ones you get from a doctor? You know they're not. Did you know that many fake pills contain fentanyl, and an amount small enough to fit on the tip of a pencil can be lethal? Listen, before buying pills from social media, think again. Learn more.
7's U.S. Senate debate. If you are just tuning in, the two candidates, Senator Maria Cantwell on my left, Dr. Raul Garcia on my right, they have been addressing the biggest issues facing our state. And we continue now with the topic of online safety. The average child spends 4 to 6 hours per day looking at a screen. That's according to a study this year conducted by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Now, for teenagers, that number is closer to 9 hours per day online. The Surgeon General recently issued an advisory about social media having a negative impact on the mental health of children. And the FTC is raising the alarm on how companies are collecting children's data. So what would you do at a federal level to ensure children and their data are safe? Senator Cantwell.
Well, we've been working hard on this issue. We actually passed 2 bills out of the United States Senate that put more restrictions on social media companies to communicate with the tools themselves to allow parents to limit some access their children have to those websites, and to put new penalties in place against those companies. Unfortunately, conservative elements in the House of Representatives stymied those bills moving any further to the House floor. I'm going to continue to fight to get those over the goal line. I also introduced legislation with my Republican colleague, Kathy McMorris-Rodgers from Spokane, on a major privacy bill that would give the United States citizenry the ability of a privacy right. If these companies violate your most personal information and cause serious harm to you, you should have your day in court and be able to go and stop these bad actors from the things that they have done with your information. In the world of AI, we can't have insurance companies who know how you drove your car and then charge you more. We can't have somebody like Uber see that your battery on your phone is about to die and charge you a higher rate. We can't have hospitals who sell information about or make information through the network available, who's there in the hospital at that time. We need to have some rules of the road for everyone, but especially get these kids' bills over the goal line.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Garcia, what would you do at a federal level to ensure children and their data are safe?
Well, you don't know the times that I have sat at the dinner table and asked our children to get off their phone and to live present in our house instead of whatever environment they're in on their phone. And I wouldn't say that the government needs to get into that. That is, our jobs as parents. But the government's job is to protect the privacy of our citizens and the privacy especially of our children. And I will support any piece of legislation that will enable us to have that privacy. Senator Cantwell talked about the bill that she has put forward with Kathy McMorris Rogers, a friend of mine and a mentor. And I'm happy that Senator Cantwell has come to our side on these privacy issues, meaning we believe in privacy. Unfortunately, the Washington Post had an article about Senator Cantwell talking about her being the biggest impediment for privacy over our internet over the last few years. So I'm glad that we're all on the same page now. Privacy is of the utmost importance for the government to protect its citizens and for us to feel that our internet interactions are private and that our information is ours and ours alone, not anybody else's to get.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I'm guessing one of the things your kids are paying attention to is TikTok. So a quick follow-up for both of you. Would you support a ban on TikTok, Senator?
Well, I had to work with my House colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, the White House, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the State Department, and craft a solution that basically allowed our federal government to say that the Chinese government can't have an outsized role in the information that is on TikTok. That now has passed, went to the president's desk, and was signed. What we're asking for is to just make sure that no deleterious information by a foreign government affects U.S. citizens or our U.S. military.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Garcia, would you support a ban on TikTok?
Oh, absolutely. I think that what was passed was the right thing for us to do. Again, privacy is paramount, and not only for companies out there to get our information for their benefit of making money, but for another government to have our information for strategic planning. That should never be the case. So yes, I 100% support it.
Thank you, Doctor. And we're going to move along now to the subject of climate change. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, last year, a record 28 disasters cost taxpayers more than $92 billion. Now, recently, Congress allocated $20 billion to FEMA for hurricane season, and $9 billion, almost half of that, was spent in 1 week following back-to-back hurricanes in the southeast. So that brings us to this question from our viewer, Ellie, on Mercer Island.
Hurricanes Milton and Helene have reminded us all that no place is safe from the increasing effects of climate change. What are the most important policies you believe Congress could pass to reduce carbon emissions?
So Ellie's question there, Dr. Garcia, what are the most important policies you believe Congress could pass to reduce carbon emissions?
Well, I think that I have said already that one of my mentors in my life was Governor Dan Evans, who created the Department of Ecology here in Washington to preserve how pristine and beautiful our state is. And I think that we all need to make sure that this is something that we cross the aisle to work, Democrats and Republicans, to keep our environment as clean as we have it for our children. Hurricane Helene and Milton bring up another subject. Look, I grew up in Miami. It was always obvious that we were going to have a couple of hurricanes in Florida every year. And I think it is outstanding that the government is still not ready for it. We see in the news that people are without food, without electricity, without water. We know these things are coming. And as a physician during COVID, I could tell you it was very frustrating to sit there and have to wait for PPE to come from China because we were not ready for that pandemic. We need to have a rainy day fund. We need to be prepared for natural disasters, and we need to preserve our environment. Our country has the strictest laws on preserving our environment. Let's bring manufacturing and industries back to America instead of outsourcing it to countries that don't care about the environment.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Senator Cantwell, what are the most important policies you believe Congress could pass to reduce carbon emissions?
I'm going to get to that, but I wanted to just say, Monique, I want to make clear, the legislation we passed regarding TikTok said that we just couldn't have government influence. Hopefully they'll sell it to somebody and they'll continue to operate, but just not with the interference of a foreign actor. Climate change is critical. We must address it. we have been able to successfully diversify our grid from 52% reliant on coal on a national basis, 19%. I have helped in those policies that have incented clean energy, wind, solar, biofuels. Also now with the hydrogen hubs, looking at everything from battery technology at our PNNL labs to doing everything we can to diversify hard to decarbonize sectors. Our challenge of the moment is we've done a good job of getting the industry moving towards electric vehicles. And now we're talking about aviation jet fuel that would be from a cleaner source. But there are hard to decarbonize sectors, maritime being one of those, agriculture being one of those, and making sure that we make progress on industry that uses heavy chemicals. So what the Inflation Reduction Act did is it put into law more incentives and clarity for a longer period of time so we can continue to unleash the hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been created in these new innovation sectors. That innovation, higher wages, is helping us diversify off of fossil fuel.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. You have shared your differences civilly and respectfully today, but it brings us to this next question, which is according to a Gallup poll from last month, a record high 80% of American adults believe the nation is divided on its most important values. That division is also evident on Capitol Hill with partisan gridlock. So the question here, if elected, how will you prioritize country over party to work across the aisle? And what actions would you take to protect and strengthen our democracy? Senator?
Well, thank you. I had to do this. I actually saw people storm the Capitol. I saw the discourse that came from people just getting on cable TV every night and just arguing instead of trying to solve problems. I made a commitment that I knew that our state didn't send me there to just argue. You sent me to get things done. And so we passed one of the most monumental pieces of legislation, the CHIPS and Science Act, in the aftermath of that attack on our Capitol. Why? Yes, it was very important policy. It was. Bring the supply chain home. Don't be overdependent on Taiwan. Drive down the cost of things. Unleash manufacturing. There's thousands of chips in cars, in computers, in planes. It was important. But it was also important to show the rest of the world that the United States wasn't so divided as that showed on the steps of the Capitol, and instead pass monumental legislation that brought the innovation investment into the United States. Billions of dollars of private sector investment has now been unleashed across the country. And not only that, it is helping us grow the middle class again. This policy of having the manufacturing supply chain come back is critical. Now, we got to do other things, Monique. We have to save local journalism. I'm the leader in the United States Senate in fighting to make sure that we stave off what the social media companies have done to our local community, both newspapers and radio and TV stations. But we're going to continue to fight for that.
That's the time, but thank you for looking out for my job. I appreciate that. Dr. Garcia, if elected, how will you prioritize country over party to work across the aisle, and what actions would you take to protect and strengthen our democracy?
You know, when I came from Cuba, I never thought that I would get in a football game in America where Democrats were competing against Republicans. When I came from Cuba, I thought of a country that had freedom of speech, that had freedom to do anything you wanted, that had the best innovation in the world, that were always leading. And those people were Americans. And I fell in love with America before ever stepping foot in this country. Coming from a totalitarian system, I could tell you that appreciating what that American dream means is not lost on me. And I have fought hard throughout my life to defend this country for what it's worth, for what it stands, for what we created with that fire to build a better place in the world than anything else. You know, I've already said a couple of times that I'm a Dan Evans Republican, and he said, I'd rather cross the aisle than cross the people of Washington. And that's what I intend to do in the United States Senate, with hard decisions, you know, talking about abortion, talking about climate change, talking about the topics that usually my party doesn't have great answers to so far. Well, I want to bring my scientific mind to politics and be a bipartisan group that is proud to be Americans.
Thank you both very much. We are nearing actually the end of our time. This has gone quickly. Now each candidate will now have 90 seconds for their closing statements. And according to that coin flip done before we began, Senator Cantwell, we start with you.
I'm asking for your support in this race for the United States Senate. As I said earlier, I didn't go to Washington to argue with people or get on cable TV. I went there to get things done. And we've been able to do things that are lowering cost and increasing wages. And we have an opportunity to grow the middle class again, to make our country the land of upward mobility. This is so important to us. We need to invest in skilling and training people in apprenticeships. We need to invest more at our colleges, community colleges, to help high schoolers who want to take courses while they're still in high school, and continue to invest in those policies that are going to help us lower costs, like on prescription drugs, stopping these middlemen who are pocketing so much money. They're literally causing problems here in our communities by closing pharmacies, and continuing to make sure that we as the United States stand up, like on privacy, and continue to advance the health care that we need. I'm going to defend a woman's right to choose. I am going to fight for what Washingtonians know is what they deserve in their lives. So I ask for your support, and I thank again Cairo TV and the League of Women Voters for having us here in this debate.
Thank you very much. Dr. Garcia, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I want to thank everybody for this great opportunity, and my goal was to instill in you the confidence and the hope that together we could build a better Washington. I know that change is hard. Now, my opponent has asked you 4 times to give her another chance at making it right. I'm asking you for one time. As a healer and a candidate for unity, I ask today for your vote. But more than that, I ask you to join me in creating a new path forward for the future, that we can put away the shadows of death in the streets, of division, of the things that we want to change in our communities, and give America a new morning. Washingtonians have always been pioneers. Well, let us be the example of accepting our diversities and unifying and giving America that new morning where we don't have these problems anymore. As your next United States Senator, I promise you that I will be present and reliable for Washington State to make these changes happen. And every day, with every step that I take and every action that I take as your U.S. Senator, I will defend the greatest country in the world. And I will pay her back for everything she's done for me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. Now, we hope this debate shed light on issues close to you and you feel better prepared to vote this election. If you tuned in late, you can watch this debate in its entirety on our website, KIRO7.com/debate. You can also scan this QR code to watch. This is far from the only race on the ballot this year. KIRO 7 just completed a special on the governor's race, diving into key issues from the 2 candidates there, Dave Reichert and Bob Ferguson. Now, we pressed the candidates on similar topics you saw discussed here today, like reproductive rights.
And hopefully the viewers will know after this interview that the governor has no authority to change the abortion law. So the fact that we're talking about this really has no impact on what I'm going to do or be able to do as the governor, minus my personal beliefs.
There are things that are going on outside of our border that can impact our access to that reproductive freedom. That's why having a governor who supports it and will act on it is critical.
Now, that special is available now on KIRO7.com, and you can also watch the full unedited interviews on our website by scanning that QR code on your screen right there. And you responsible citizens, keep your eyes peeled for ballots. State law requires all counties to send them out by tomorrow at the latest. If you are not registered, you can register online or by mail through October 28th. You can also register in person at your local elections office through 8 p.m. on Election Day. Be sure to submit your signed ballot in an official drop box by 8 p.m. on November 5th. And thank you again so much for joining us today on Cairo 7. We really hope you are now able to make informed decisions. Please make sure your voice is heard this election.
If you have a mental health issue, doctors often recommend cognitive behavioral therapy. What is that? I'll tell you more after this.
Offer not valid in all states or where prohibited by law. Loans are subject to lender approval. See website for details.
Meet Brian. He just got $5,000, and it was pretty easy. I'll tell you how in 10 seconds. Brian needed cash help. After being rejected by banks, he tried 27cash.com. Told them how much he needed, even let them know he had bad credit. In minutes, 27cash.com found a lender who deposited $5,000 into his bank account the very next day. If you need cash help, even if you have bad credit, go to 27cash.com. 27cash.com.
Offer not valid in all states or where prohibited by law. Loans are subject to lender approval. See website for details.
Honey, the credit card bill came, and we're maxed out.
Maxed out cards, rent is due. We need cash help.
We should go to 57cash.com.
With our bad credit?
57cash.com helps all credit types. They partner with over 100 lenders to help even people with bad credit get approved for up to $10,000. And cash can hit our bank account as soon as tomorrow.
Wow. When you need cash help, go to 57cash.com. 57cash.com.
Different types of mental illness call for different types of therapy. One type, called cognitive behavioral therapy, is a two-point system that locks into the conversations we all have with ourselves, the ones inside our head. The therapist will first help you understand what you're saying to yourself, and guess what? It's usually negative, and then help you change the script to change how you feel and how you act. Abbreviated as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy can be used to help treat everything from PTSD to gambling addiction. It's offered by a host of psychologists, licensed social workers, and other therapists, and for some conditions, it works even better than medication. With Your Body, I'm ABC's Dr. Jennifer Ashton.
I always had to be so good, no one could ignore me. Carve my path with data and drive. But some people only see who I am on paper. The paper ceiling. The limitations from degree screens to stereotypes that are holding back over 70 million stars. Workers skilled through alternative routes, rather than a bachelor's degree. It's time for skills to speak for themselves. Find resources for breaking through barriers at tearthepaperceiling.org. Brought to you by Opportunity at Work and the Ad Council.
I used to smoke. I thought of cigarettes as my best friend.
They were always there for me when I needed a break.
I also thought cigarettes were my best friend. And then they gave me peripheral artery disease.
I smoked and had a stroke. Actually, multiple strokes.
I smoked and have heart disease.
Here's my tip. If cigarettes are your friend, you need a better friend.
You can quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A message from the CDC.
From ABC News, I'm Mike Dubusky. Yahya Sinwar has been killed. He's the leader of Hamas who died in a firefight with Israeli forces in Gaza today. Sinwar is considered the architect of the October 7th attacks on Israel last year, which killed around 1,200 people. Zahiro Moore told ABC News he lost 2 relatives in the attacks, but he's pushing for a peace deal from Israel.
I'm not shedding one tear. You know, this guy really probably did mastermind the death of my uncle, both my cousin and my uncle. But still, there are so many other aspects to look. The horrendous humanitarian condition in Gaza.
In Washington, the State Department is reacting to Sinwar's death.
The State Department spokesman says the late Hamas leader leaves behind a blood-soaked legacy.
He didn't just launch this conflict, but for the past year has refused the efforts of the United States and our partners to end it.
Matthew Miller says Yahya Sinwar was an obstacle to a ceasefire.
That obstacle has obviously been removed.
Miller says his death offers both sides a chance to restart talks on a hostage release and an end to the war.
We want to seize that opportunity.
Stephen Portnoy, ABC News, Washington.
The White House says President Biden will speak with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about Sinwar's killing. Biden arrives in Berlin today for closed-door meetings with German, French, and British allies. The White House says the meetings will cover the Middle East and the war in Ukraine.
A senior administration official says that Germany is the second largest provider of military aid to Ukraine after the United States. Another key part of this trip is also President Biden thanking the German chancellor for the critical role that he played in the Russian prisoner swap. The release of a Russian assassin from German custody was critical to getting Russia to agree to release the imprisoned Americans.
ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang. You're listening to ABC News.
This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
When it comes to my lifestyle and diet, I don't always make the smartest choices.
Touchdown! Woo! Hey, how about another round and some more chips?
But when it comes to taking care of my liver, I do make one very smart choice. Active liver tablets from New Nordic. I used to have real issues with my liver, and at my last checkup, my doc was concerned about my numbers. But since adding a once-a-day active liver tablet, my gut's better, I feel great, and my doctor's happy. I ask a lot of my liver, so the least I can do to say thanks is a daily dose of Active Liver.
You ask a lot of your liver, so give it the support it needs with Active Liver. You can find Active Liver at Amazon.com, or for a volume discount, visit NewNordicUSA.com. Go to NewNordicUSA.com, Amazon, or ask for Active Liver at your local CVS. New year, new you, New Nordic.
Routine vaccinations among kindergartners during the 2023-2024 school year have decreased. The CDC says this is the fourth year in a row that coverage levels for all reported vaccines have been below 95%. That's the threshold goal to prevent one infection from sparking an outbreak. Mortgage rates have increased for the third week in a row. The average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rose to 6.44%, the highest level since August. Officials say false claims about FEMA have damaged the agency's ability to respond to Hurricanes Helene and Milton. The misinformation also leading to a tense standoff in Tennessee.
An angry armed group of people confronted relief workers in the Hurricane Helene disaster zone in Tennessee last weekend. Carter County Sheriff Mike Fraley.
Those FEMA workers, they're here to help, and if you don't want FEMA's help, then, politely tell them so. But they are human beings just like we are.
Turns out the relief workers were not with FEMA at all, but were part of a volunteer group that's been responding to disasters for 20 years. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
Neiman Marcus is out with its annual catalog of extravagant Christmas gifts. The 2024 holiday book features a $20,000 jewel-encrusted mahjong set. Also in the catalog, an 18th century carriage designed for King Charles III that retails for $1.9 million. I'm Mike Dubusky.
Enjoy all the colors of the season. Your enjoyment starts now with help from Airport Garden Center. Airport Garden Center opened for business in 1977 as a pet, plant, and feed store by Eldora and Floyd Matthews. The Matthews family are still loving storekeepers to this day. Their family is dedicated to providing your family quality service and products for a fun, rewarding pet and child-friendly shopping atmosphere. Are you looking for a special, unique gift? Airport Garden Center is proud to support locally sourced items such as Full Moon candles and Pacific Rain Shadow Farms handcrafted soap and Miss B apiary honey. Go to airportgarden.biz for current specials or just stop by. They love helping you plan next season by offering monthly special savings. Airport Garden Center, planting knowledge, growing gardeners since 1977.
KONP News brought to you by RE/MAX Evergreen Real Estate. Outstanding agents, outstanding results at 457-6600. City of Sequim has banned the sale of fireworks within the city limits. The new ordinance going into effect at this time next year. In 2016, the city banned discharge of fireworks in the Sequim city limits, but city staff say that allowing sales and prohibiting discharge was confusing to residents. So this week, the council voted in favor of banning the sale of fireworks in Sequim. You will still see fireworks stands again next summer. The new ordinance going into effect in the fall of next year.
Here's your Newsradio KONP forecast, brought to you by Olympic Game Farm. Bright sunshine expected this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 53. Winds out of the northwest, 5 to 10 miles per hour. Cloudy skies expected tonight, lows dip down to about 42. Isolated rain showers likely tomorrow. High temperatures reach up to 52, cloudy skies expected. Upper 50s Saturday with isolated rain showers likely. Much cooler Sunday with highs in the low 50s. Showers continue. Taking a look at the extended forecast, 50 Monday, 48 Tuesday, and 49 on Wednesday. That's a look at your forecast. I'm meteorologist Paul Trombley. Currently 54.
It's the Todd Ortloff Show on Newsradio KONP. Now, here's Todd.
All right, welcome once again to our program, another in our candidate forums today, and we've been just going right through the Legislative District 24th candidates, and we're going to do yet another of the races, and that is for position number 1 in the State House, and 2 candidates running, Adam Birnbaum and Matt Roberson. They both join us on the air this afternoon. Thanks, both of you, for coming in. Great to see you both. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
you for having us.
And as we go through this, for folks who don't know, I give each of our candidates a couple of minutes as an opening statement. We flipped a coin because we don't have an incumbent really in this race. So Adam won and chose to go first. So Adam Birnbaum, a couple of minutes about you, and open us up, please.
My name's Adam Birnbaum, and I'm running for state representative in the 24th Legislative District for position 1. I grew up in unincorporated Spokane County in a home that had 2 things. My dad had a union job as a high school counselor. My mom struggled with a gambling addiction and alcoholism. And what my dad's union job did for my family is it provided us with stability. It meant that we had access to insurance. We didn't have to move around a lot as a kid. And over the last several years, working as a legislative assistant to Senator Kevin Vandeweghe and as a field organizer for Derek Kilmer, I've had the opportunity to talk to people all across the peninsula who are living in homes where that union job has gone away. And the stories that I've heard have sounded like this. I've talked to countless senior citizens who are living in manufactured home parks who see their costs increase year after year after year while their fixed incomes stay flat. I've talked to young families who are trying to start a family. I've talked to young couples who are trying to start a family, but who can't afford the cost of childcare, where part of that conversation is trying to figure out which person is going to quit their job when they have their first kid. It's challenging to buy your first home. Small business owners talk about the challenges that they experience bringing in new employees. Of people all across the peninsula are dealing with these costs. And I'm running because I want to do something about it. The conversations I've had with people haven't all been doom and gloom, though. I think that there is a positive vision of the future. It's one I believe in, too. It's one where we build bridges and repair roads and fix marinas and recreate a lot of these jobs in the building trades and create a lot of economic prosperity in rural communities. It's one where we invest generously in our schools and our hospitals so we have the type of community that everybody wants to go to, where people can see a future for their kids here. And if I get elected, that's what I'm going to work on in Olympia next year. So thank you for having us on. I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
All right, that's Adam Birnbaum. Now we go over to Matt Roberson. A couple minutes about you and why you're running.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. I'm running for position 1, state representative. And, love this country, love this state. I've been able to live my American dream. Started off in Tacoma and Pierce County, growing up in a family that struggled with homelessness and poverty and my mom's painkiller addiction. But was always told, work hard and, you can overcome this adversity, and was able to do that. And, now I've served the residents of this county as a deputy prosecuting attorney. I have for the past 8 years. And, raising my 2-year-old to make sure she has even better opportunities than I do. And that's really what it's all about, making sure future generations have better opportunities than we do. And, being here, I don't see that happening anymore. Groceries are more expensive. Fuel is more expensive. Housing is limited and more expensive. Our crime rates are higher than they have been before. As the rest of the country goes down in a rate of crime, we see the crime in Washington increase, whether that's violent crime or property crime. And, we've sent the same people to Olympia for the past 20 years. We've had one group of majority in the State House for 20 years, and I think it's time for a change. Want to make sure we pass on those opportunities, and that's what it's all about. So I want to focus on housing, public safety, and making sure we have better schools. Thank you.
All right, Matt, we'll go to you first on this question, and it has to do about prices. Certainly, it's costing us more and more for a lot of things, gas, groceries, all of that. You referred to many of those. Do you have a plan for how you would address that at the state level, at least, if you're elected?
Yeah, I think, a lot of inflation is driven by the federal government, but what makes it worse here in Washington is we have a legislature that through good intention a lot of times passes policy and taxes and regulation that increase the cost of business, and simple economics are those costs are passed on to consumers. And so, phase one of that, actually voters will get to decide this November, and that's the Climate Commitment Act, whether to keep it. When it was passed, it threw an extra 50 cents onto the price of a gallon of gas, and so voters will tackle that. What I aim to do is then in Olympia is look at regulatory reform, as far as small businesses, the building trades, construction development. It's not a surprise when we have as much regulation as we do, and when some of it's nonsensical. For example, the state energy code says new construction has to be heat pumps. Well, that adds thousands of dollars right at the top. 1/5 the cost of new housing is regulation-based and permit delays. And so we can take a chunk out of that if we streamline regulations. We want to make sure we protect the environment, and we want worker safety and consumer safety. But the question has to be, when Olympia is going over regulation or new taxes, who's going to hurt this the most? Is it going to be like the Climate Commitment Act and hurt working people the most? Or is it really necessary? And so want to take a surgical strike towards regulations. Some of the taxes folks pay, those need to be lowered.
All right. Let's go over to Adam Birnbaum. Same question. How, if elected, do you have a plan for how the state can tackle some of these high prices?
Yeah, and it's very similar to Matt's answer. I think that a lot of the increase in inflation is being driven by federal policy. I think that one of the biggest drivers of cost locally, that when you're just looking at individual household budgets, it's the cost of housing. It has increased precipitously. It loads heaviest on working families, young people. An apartment complex that would have cost you $600-700 is now costing you $1,200-1,300. So there are two things that we can do to lower the cost of housing. Well, there are a lot of different things. I'm going to talk about two of them. One of them is we can focus on increasing the supply of new housing, in particular dense multifamily housing, apartment complexes, fourplexes, sixplexes. We haven't done a good job creating a regulatory environment or creating a set of infrastructure that encourages investment in that type of housing. So one of the things that I'd like to do is increase investment in a pool of dollars called CHIP. CHIP is a pool of money that can go toward building some of the infrastructure inputs that you need to create dense multifamily housing. I'd like to see the allocation for that program go up. It allows us to work specifically with the municipalities, with the counties, to come up with plans to say, hey, here's a place where we'd like to see a new apartment complex, and we're going to use some state money to build some of the infrastructure that we need to attract a competitive investment from real estate developers who want to put that in. I think that there are common sense regulatory reforms that we can implement too. I fully agree with Matt's critique of the building code. We have added way too much cost there. We should make it easier for us to build. I'm a used Toyota Camry driver, and right now, the way we regulate homes, we're asking people to buy the Tesla of homes, build the Tesla of homes. I want us to be able to build these slightly less efficient but much more affordable homes, and then I want to put some state dollars toward creating the infrastructure that will allow us to build a lot of them. That, more than anything, is going to lower the costs for the individuals who are working these minimum wage jobs. It'll mean that some of the wage price pressure that's driving up the cost of goods will go down, and I think that's an important first step for us to take.
Right, Climate Commitment Act, I want to talk just a bit about that. That is before voters. There's an initiative that could repeal it if it's approved. Just your thoughts as candidates running, where you stand on the Climate Commitment Act. Does it need to have some changes, or is it fine the way it is, Adam?
I support the Climate Commitment Act. I think that we could change it to make it a little bit more fair to rural communities, and I can go into the details about that if you'd like. But just to get to the heart of the question and the reason why I support it, Climate change has been a catastrophe for the environment. It's been a catastrophe for our economy already. We've already had years where along the Hood Canal, there's been mass die-offs in shellfish. We have to take responsibility for it. And I think that there is strong public will for us to take responsibility for it. I don't really think that that is the question before us. The question is the Climate Commitment Act the right vehicle, or should we pick some alternative vehicle? My perspective, simply, is that while the Climate Commitment Act isn't perfect, it is a messy but important first step that creates a flexible tool where we can say that allows us both to discourage the most carbon-emitting industries and also creates a pool of dollars that we can then use to invest in creating a green economy that's prepared for the 21st century. I think Matt's got some very fair points about how that pool of money can be used as a slush fund. And I don't support people taking money basically out of the pockets of consumers and spending it on whatever they want. I don't think that that's a reason to get rid of this act entirely. And if you talk to most members of the business community, rather than supporting a complete repeal of the Climate Commitment Act, what they want is regulatory consistency. There are few worse things that we could do to encourage business in Washington state than to completely get rid of this regulatory edifice that we've been developing over the last several years and then try to quickly replace it with something else. That's going to create far more uncertainty. It's going to be a more challenging environment for investors and for businesses that have just started to get used to the system we've created in place. In general, I'm a pragmatist. I'm not a radical. I think that we should work within the systems that exist and try to improve them rather than destroy those systems and remake them when we see problems.
Right, Matt, to you, Climate Commitment Act, same question. How do you feel about this? What would you do differently?
I'll be voting yes on I-2117, which is a vote to repeal. I encourage others to do the same. I believe we can tackle climate change through innovation and technology and some other things we can talk more about later. But the Climate Commitment Act doesn't actually require the funds to be spent on climate change initiatives. It is a slush fund. It pays subsidies to BP, so of course they're in support of it. They get more out of it than what they pay in the climate allowances. And so it's a giant shell game, and what we're telling working families, what the majority party is telling working families, is let them eat cake, because it's rural working families that pay more in gas. It's our groceries that are higher cost, and out here on the peninsula where we face higher transportation costs especially, that's added in the price of groceries. It's added in the price of energy. And we have a state government who would rather virtue signal than do something effective. And if something is ineffective and if it's hurting working families, we need to go back to the drawing board. And I would encourage folks to Google Cliff Mass. He's a climatologist. I support his positions. He does a fantastic critique on the Climate Commitment Act. So Google Cliff Mass, I-2117, and he's got a great article and research about it.
All right, we need to take a break. We'll come back. We'll touch on some of these issues, I think, in other ways as we go through the rest of the hours. We hear from candidates for position 1 in the State House for the 24th District, Adam Birnbaum and Matt Roberson, my guests. Back with more with both of them right after this.
This is the Todd Ortloff Show on Newsradio KONP.
I understand that as our world becomes more automated, receiving personalized service from a real person is more meaningful than ever. I'm Dan Shappy, and as a farmer's agent, I know a thing or two about how to help you select the insurance you want so you can
protect what matters most.
Call 360-681-0696 to learn more and chat with me, a real person and experienced farmer's agent, today.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Underwritten by Farmers Truck Fire Insurance Exchanges and Affiliates. Products not available in every state.
Red Carpet Car Wash in Carlsberg is always adding to the list of things they provide to keep your vehicle looking brand new. The full detail shop is just one more service to check off that list. Not only will your interior and exterior shine, your engine will sparkle too. Red Carpet is also getting some winter upgrades, including new equipment in the manual bay and new vacuums. Call Kyle today and let him get you scheduled for your red carpet treatment Tuesday through Saturday. 360-461-0826.
Energy conservation has many financial and environmental advantages. The power and water you conserve benefits all of us. The PUD offers a wide variety of incentives to help make your home or business more efficient. I'm Ken Simpson, and I'm running for Clallam County PUD Commissioner. I'll continue to fight for those incentives for you because conservation makes sense for all of us.
This ad paid for by Ken Simpson for PUD Commissioner.
This season, beat the holiday rush and shop Astound.com for bigger deals, bigger savings, and bigger internet. For a limited time, get Astound Internet for only $20 a month for 2 years. Plus, add 5G unlimited Astound Mobile free for 12 months. Our award-winning fiber-powered internet can handle it all. Faster streaming, better gaming, and secure online shopping. Lock in bigger savings than ever before at Astound.com. Restrictions apply. See Astound.com for details.
Hi, this is Bill Benedict. I served 2 of my 4 terms as Clallam County Sheriff with Commissioner Randy Johnson. He was and still is an exceptionally talented community leader and problem solver who puts the welfare and concerns of his constituents ahead of partisan politics. Clallam County needs the proven leadership, accountability, and political independence of Randy Johnson to continue as District 2 County Commissioner. Please join me in voting for Randy this November 5th.
Paid for by the committee to elect Randy Johnson.
At United Way of Clallam County, we want to make it easier for our community to access high-quality, affordable education. That is why United Way, in partnership with Peninsula College, offers free help with student financial aid navigation. No clue where to start when it comes to paying for education? Start with our student financial aid liaison. Whether you're going to PC or out of state, email collegeaccess@unitedwayclallam.org to book an appointment now.
All right, welcome back to the show where we've got a candidate forum today. We have Adam Birnbaum and Matt Roberson. They're running for State Legislative District 24 in the House and position number 1 there. Should point out today you should be starting to get your ballots. They were mailed out yesterday, so some decisions are going to be made here quite soon here locally as well. Matt, we're going to go back to you first on this next one, and that has to do with the potential. The state Supreme Court is taking up a recommendation from the Bar Association, essentially, that could have some sweeping changes on caseloads for defense attorneys. It's really lowering the threshold. There's 2 parts to this question. One is, this puts a tremendous burden on local counties because they have to pay for indigent defense. You're probably well aware of that in your day job, as they say. But the argument is if elected, what would you do to help somehow address this, aside from the point of changing caseload levels? But counties are going broke and having to pay for indigent defense. Do you have a plan?
I think a lot of folks are really hoping that the Supreme Court presses pause. They haven't published the rule yet. It's still open for public comment. But I think the legislature is going to have to make up the shortfall. Let's remember that the counties are enforcing state criminal law, and it's the state's obligation to provide indigent defense. We do that through the counties, and so I think the state's going to have to play a role in that. I think the larger challenge, and this is the kind of the question that goes unanswered, there aren't enough attorneys to meet the proposed caseload limitations. And I will mention that already we actually have caseload limitations in this state. This is really a needless rule for many areas in the state. It's based on research done from other parts of the country that they're importing here. And so the legislature is going to have to make a difference. I would support doing that. I think it's the role. I would rather see us make up the difference from the legislature because the counties can't fund it. We have a shortfall here in Clallam County. Other counties are similar. But one of the primary responsibilities of the state is public safety and criminal justice, and providing for the constitutional rights of a defendant is part of that. You can't have one without the other. And I would rather us fill the shortfall that counties face rather than have prosecutor offices not be able to prosecute property crimes and drug offenses, which will be the result.
All right, Adam, same question. If elected, how do you see the state legislature engaged in this?
Yeah, it's a chief priority of the state to make sure that we're providing the resources that we need to have a functional criminal justice system that both can prosecute folks when they commit crimes, and also that provides defense for indigent defenders. So I support having the state cover the cost that comes through. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not deep enough into the weeds to be able to speak with great specificity about, especially given the state budgetary conditions as well as the local county budgetary conditions, what that looks like. What is concerning to me is the idea that if the state doesn't meet that obligation, we're going to be sticking, in particular, the poorer counties with where we're going to be putting them in a very challenging situation where they're either not compliant with this finding, or they aren't able to adequately provide other services because they're increasing funding here, and that's going to mean more cuts in other places that they can't afford. So I think it's important that the state comes up with the money, and I wish I could speak with greater thought about where those dollars are going to come from.
I'm going to revisit a little bit. We got into housing in another question we had earlier, but I want to go specifically about the state's housing crisis, if you will. We're woefully short in the number of housing units that need to be built to keep up. I mean, we're talking thousands of units. So if elected, Adam, I'll go to you first on this. How do you see as a state legislator a way to plug into this to address that need?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple different routes that the state can take. One of them has to do with providing direct contributions and support for the construction of new housing units and addressing supply in that way. So there's a pool of dollars in something called the Housing Trust Fund that goes towards building new homes. A lot of the Habitat homes that get built, many of them are supported by having Housing Trust Fund dollars. So making sure that we continue to provide support so we can build homes, in particular so we can build homes for folks in the community is important. I already mentioned the CHIP fund. That acts in a slightly different way. Rather than building the homes themselves, this builds the infrastructure that we need to allow the market to make those investments itself. And I think that one of the benefits of that approach is it adds new dollars to the system. We need more money to be invested in the construction of new housing. And that gets to a second piece, which is making sure that we have a friendly regulatory environment that encourages the investment of dollars in real estate. I think that there's a lot of things that we can do around lot splitting, making changes to reduce setback requirements, making changes to the energy code to lower some of the costs there that will encourage some of these investments to come into the community. The housing crisis is a national crisis. It is felt profoundly locally. I don't think that anybody can point to one specific set of solutions and say, hey, this is the prescription that you take to deal with this issue. I think that we should look at it through the lens of bottlenecks. What are the current bottlenecks that we face to unlock new housing development now? Let's address those as they come, and then see and then take a new lay of the land. The other thing that I want to note on this is that the approach that I'm describing requires a little bit of patience. I think that it's important that as we're doing that assessment as we go along, we acknowledge that this is a long-term problem that is a result of, from my perspective, a decades-long decision that many local governments engaged in to create a regulatory apparatus that really discouraged building anything other than single-family homes. And I think that it's going to take a long time for us to move back away from that. This isn't to say that we shouldn't be building single-family homes at all. I'm just speaking from a high-level perspective of how we got here. We need to make these changes that allows us to make investments in new housing and to be open-minded as we implement these regulatory changes, is to be able to be honest and say, hey, what's working, what's not working. I think it's the absence of that reflective component that has really gotten us into this situation in the first place.
Right, Matt, over to you. How do you address this shortage of housing units?
Well, Adam's right. It didn't happen overnight. It happened while the majority in Olympia has been on the watch. People have been saying since 2015, 2017, we're woefully under house building here in Washington State. Part of it is encouraging infrastructure, and so there is agreement about that between Adam and I as far as the trust fund and CHIP. I would go a little bit further with those programs. There's certain limitations on who can receive them based upon can they meet all the grant criteria or the loan criteria, and there's certain labor union requirements that a local that the agency receiving money, the builders they're contracting with, have to fulfill. I would create some safety valves in that for rural communities. Clallam County is not King County or Kitsap County. We don't have as much unionized construction shops out here, and I think our local builders should be able to take take opportunities of fulfilling those contracts. But more for me, government money alone isn't going to get us out of this mess. We're gonna have to unleash the private sector and unleash our builders and our developers. And so that means, like what we spoke about earlier, reducing regulations. We have to make business sense for builders to build multifamily housing and other types of homes. And so that means taking a look at the real estate taxes we pay. It means not increasing the property tax and adding to costs. It means, like we said earlier, taking a look at the state energy code. Most states don't have state energy codes. They let the consumers choose, and I think that's something we should get back to. And aside from regulatory reform, we have to look at how we do planning and development. The majority party has refused to have hearings on bills that would allow for lot splitting in rural areas for up to a fourplex. As long as there's enough minimal land and as long as there's decent water and septic or sewer systems, that bill would let that happen. It would be quickly permitted and expedited. That would encourage more housing that way. And so we need those bills to have hearings, and we need them to get to the floor. We need them to be passed. We also see that in areas like Seattle and the rest of King County, they can build detached ADU units, and those ADUs aren't taxed. They're not assessed a separate tax. It encourages building those ADUs. That the rest of the state, including our area, is excluded from that. And every time, and the few times it's gotten brought up, special interest groups object, and the bills never see the light of day. Those are two bills that are ready to go that could increase housing right away. And finally, we need permitting reform. Every month of delay is more cost. We see that in housing. And when a builder's out here trying to decide, am I going to develop and build, if it's going to be an extra $10,000, $20,000 because we're waiting, that's a problem. In Jefferson County, they've had developments waiting on permitting for 18 years. That's insane. So.
All right. We need to take a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about some other things related to legislative. Lots of things we can talk about, but we only have so much time. Matt Roberson and Adam Birnbaum, my guests, they're running for position 1 in the State House out of the 24th District. Back with both of them right after this.
Steve Theringer is honored to be your state representative, working with you to fund education, strengthen our healthcare system, making investments in our ports and parks, and promoting new forest products. We need to improve access to healthcare, improve long-term care, and protect our environment while growing our economy. By working together at the state and local level, we can build thriving communities to help our families flourish. Please vote Steve Theringer so we may continue working together to make the Olympic Peninsula an even better place to live.
Paid for by Theringer for State Representative Democrat.
Come out to Olympic Game Farm. It's the home of the waving bears. Come out to Olympic Game Farm for some tender love and care. Now it's not impolite to stick out your tongue, considering the critters you'll be among. Come out to Olympic Game Farm. It's the home of the waving bears. The llama and the yak know you want to come back, and the tiger always gets a few stares. Come out to Olympic Game Farm. It's the home of the waving bears.
For the Washington State News Network, I'm Rob Francis. The Navy has located the wreckage of the Growler fighter jet that crashed east of Mount Rainier during a training flight Tuesday. The crash occurred around 3:30 in the afternoon, with search teams discovering the wreckage at 12:30 on Wednesday. The site is inaccessible by vehicle and snow is expected in the area. Officials have not confirmed if the crew ejected before the crash, which is under investigation. Court documents revealing unsettling details about a student who brought a gun to Shaw Middle School on Tuesday, causing a lockdown. Prosecutors say the 12-year-old boy told a pair of students about the gun and threatened to shoot one of them in the head if they told administrators. He allegedly told one of the students he brought the gun to school because of another student, but didn't say anything else. The boy is alleged to have dropped the backpack and ran when confronted by a school resource officer. He was later caught. The loaded gun was found in that backpack. Firefighters on the scene of a new wildfire after a prescribed burn in the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area got out of control. The top of the world fire is burning on U.S. forest lands between Bingen and Lyle, and it's burned 170 acres thus far. An air tanker was used to prevent the fire from spreading toward Old Highway 8, SR 14, and private property. A helicopter used to put out hotspots. Ground crews are working to build containment lines around the blaze. For more on these stories and others, download the WSNN mobile app. You can also visit our website, WashingtonStateNews.net.
Here's your News Radio KONP forecast, brought to you by Olympic Game Farm. Bright sunshine expected this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 53. Winds out of the northwest, 5 to 10 miles per hour. Cloudy skies expected tonight, lows dip down to about 42. Isolated rain showers likely tomorrow. High temperatures reach up to 52, cloudy skies expected. Upper 50s Saturday with isolated rain showers likely. Much cooler Sunday with highs in the low 50s. Showers continue. Take a look at the extended forecast. 50 Monday, 48 Tuesday, and 49 on Wednesday. That's a look at your forecast. I'm meteorologist Paul Trombley. Currently 54.
All right, back with more as we continue our discussion with the candidates running for position 1 in the State House for the 24th District. That's Adam Birnbaum and Matt Roberson. Matt, we'll go over to you first on this next question. Your thoughts about what you think is the biggest issue facing the state right now?
You know, I think it's definitely housing. And the reason I say that is not only does it impact the costs that come out of people's wallet every month, and not only does it stop people from starting families or moving to this area, but when we look at economic development and companies look at investing in our area, where's their workforce going to live? You know, Amazon's building a distribution center here, and, you know, reading the Facebook comments, some of the questions some folks ask is, well, if more people move here, where do they live? And so that's a calculus that investors and companies look at here. But we also see its impact in our schools. When young families can't move here or can't start out here, that means less kids in our public schools. That affects enrollment dollars. We see the hospital when we have less workforce housing. It goes into the position where we have more population on Medicare and Medicaid, less private insurers, and we see the funding deficits and other issues that Olympic Medical Center is having. It really impacts every part of our society. And then, of course, if you don't have a place to live, you have that worry too. And we see that with homelessness, and affordability of housing is a portion of that issue.
All right. Adam, same question in your mind.
Well, I have almost the exact same answer, so I'm just gonna elaborate slightly on a couple of things that Matt said. And I'm going to talk specifically about the link between housing and economic development. Housing affects many parts of the community. One of the most profound challenges that we face as we're trying to find the future of economic growth here is that it is hard. It is really hard for small business owners to attract employees. If the cost of housing increases, the number of people who can work either minimum wage jobs or lower paying jobs in the tourism sector significantly decreases. They can't see a future for themselves there. These types of bridge positions just no longer feel competitive. And it also affects people as you go up the income ladder. If you're a physician and it's challenging for you to find housing, or if we're trying to hire a new sheriff, I believe that there was a period of time in Port Townsend where a newly hired sheriff was staying in the basement of a city council member for about 6 months. I don't want to spread untrue stories, but that's a huge problem. It means that at every stage of economic growth, we face limitations and barriers. And there are many parts of our system that are already in some jeopardy. OMC is in a really tough place. We make it much harder when it's challenging for us to attract new nurses to come here, when we have to be more reliant on travelers. All of these things compounds the difficulty that we have to have the type of competitive economy that we want to live in.
All right, school funding. Let's talk a bit about that. Certainly, the local districts here in I guess the whole 24th district really are all kind of in a struggle right now with school funding because the formula doesn't quite work after things have been recalculated. Your thoughts about changes? Would you support some sort of change or even propose something?
I think that there are a few things that we should do, and I want to say at the top that I support the levy. I think other folks should vote for it too. We should put our money where our mouth is when we're talking about supporting school funding. It's important that we maintain that current levy and vote for it this November. two changes that I want to see made that I think will have a fairly immediate effect on rural schools. The first is fully funding special education. The reason why this matters is that right now, I'm just going to use the Port Angeles School District as an example. I believe the special education propensity in the Port Angeles School District is about 20%. So about 20% of kids are getting some type of resources or services that should be paid for by the state, because the state requires that we provide certain services to kids that have special needs. It's a good thing. But what the state does is they only fund special education, I believe, at 15% right now. Maybe they bumped it up to 16%. And the consequence of that is that there's this unfunded component that comes out of money that would go toward extracurricular activities in schools, having smaller classroom sizes. And because some of the special education supports that people receive at schools scale with the geographic size of the district. So, for example, a support that's going to sit on that's going to be on a school bus with kids, the longer those bus routes, the more money that costs. When you don't fully fund special education, it compounds and becomes even more expensive for rural districts. So it is, in my mind, a failure of the state to uphold one of its fundamental obligations, and it has a compounding and disproportionate effect for rural communities. Another thing that we should do is change the regionalization formula. This basically is money that gets added on top of the money that's allocated to school districts to accommodate the cost of living. It is, in my mind, one of the most regressive policies in Washington state. We are directly looking at the communities where the cost of housing is highest, where the wealth is greatest, and we're saying, hey, we're going to give you more. And what this does is two things. The first is, when there's a disparity between the regionalization money that's given to two districts. So take, for example, East Jefferson County and North Kitsap County. East Jefferson gets less regionalization money than North Kitsap. East Jefferson is already a poorer district than North Kitsap. And then they have to pay more money that isn't funded by the state to try to make a competitive bid for teachers, because these teachers are functionally in the same labor market. You know, whether you cross the bridge to go to work, whether you stay in Jefferson County is not that big of a deal if you're going to be making $5,000-$10,000 more in Kitsap County. So at a minimum, shrinking that. Going into the weeds a little bit here. Right now, I believe that there's 6% is the maximum that you can have between two contiguous districts, in terms of the difference between the regionalization allocation. Shrinking that down to something like 2%, or changing the regionalization formula entirely, which is going to be a bigger project, but one that I support. So we're supporting the districts that need the money most, rather than supporting the districts that are wealthiest.
All right. Matt, education funding, your thoughts about what needs to happen?
Well, I'll join Adam in criticizing the majority in Olympia for the system they've set up. It rewards wealthier urban districts, and we see the results here on the peninsula. So I also would support changing the regionalization formula. It just does not take into account the vast distances for transportation costs. It doesn't take into account the difficulties we have in attracting teachers into our labor markets. None of that is envisioned by that and isn't taken into account. So we need to adjust that. That's priority number one. If we don't, then the gaps between the zip code lottery will just grow and grow and grow. And it's not fair to our kids. For me, it's a civil rights issue. Education is how I got out of poverty. And I want to make sure future Washingtonians have that opportunity. Special education needs to be fully funded as long as the state's not meeting its constitutional obligation. And so to me, it's outrageous that the state has to spend money that is supposed to be for extracurricular activities or extras has to be spent on what's a necessity. I mean, I'm glad the school board is doing that, so it is getting spent, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. It shouldn't be that way, and the state needs to take a look at that and adjust that. And what I would do is, pull special ed funding out of the prototypical formula that we use and establish a new formula that looks just at what is each school district's need based upon the number of students in special education, the needs of that particular special education student or tiers of needs, and then what's the transportation cost for that district, and basically have an additional formula for that so that the special education money is separate and apart from the prototypical model which is how other parts of education are funded. And so we need to fill that 4% gap and really help our schools out that way. If we do that, then maybe our school districts can use those levy monies for what they're supposed to do.
Boy, I hate doing this at the end, but we're going to try to squeeze this in.
All right.
Behavioral health funding. There's a big mess in our state with places to put people who need this help. There's not beds. There's issues with Western State Hospital. We see this all the time in the news. Your thoughts about funding and addressing a crisis really in behavioral health generally in our state?
Yeah, and I've seen some of the impact of this on a daily basis at work. We have folks where there aren't beds for them to go through the criminal competency process. We're releasing folks who probably should be civilly committed back into our communities. And then otherwise we have folks, wandering the streets here and having incidents here or being in our ERs, and which increases cost to OMC. So we do need to change that. I would like to see more acute psychiatric care available in the communities. We will have a 16-bed psychiatric facility here soon. It's something Jamestown is working on. I think they've done a fairly good job with the MAC clinic. They'll have that facility. I would like to see that around other parts of the state as well. So there will be some investment on that end. The focus on just having 2 state hospitals, which was the focus for a long time, Eastern and Western State, has ended up being a disaster. Western State lost its federal accreditation, which meant less money. We need to work on getting that back so we can get some of those federal funds restored, because that'll put less pressure. And ultimately, as far as, the acute care in the community, then turning to just maintenance care, I would like to see us go more to kind of the model that some areas use, where we have certified community behavioral health clinics. Folks can walk in, they can get their medications, they can meet with somebody, and fund those not so much on a per encounter rate, like at a doctor's office, but okay, in this community, we think that we'll have X number of need. Fund those dollars so that when somebody's in need of care, they're not having to figure out insurance or anything, because the money's already there. The state's already done the money. There's a federal program for this already. We have a few pilot clinics in the state. I would like to see the state hop on board that and say, okay, how can we do a state pathway to this too, and to increase the community care facilities.
All right. Adam, behavioral health.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of what Matt said. I'm just going to add a few things to it. One of the biggest challenges that we have in our community is the absence of capacity. It's really tough to get people placed, and that means that we first put a lot of pressure on the hospitals. People end up having very long stays, difficult to discharge patients, can't find a bed in the community. They don't have great clinical outcomes coming out of those stays. It means that we load a lot of cost onto the criminal justice system. We spend a lot of time shuffling people with behavioral health needs between jail cells and tent encampments and acute and the emergency room at OMC to little benefit for anybody. And what we need to do is first invest in having more bed space. I think it's fantastic that the Jamestown are bringing on the 16 new beds. The dollars that we spend to increase the capacity for us to provide behavioral health services will almost certainly pay for themselves in the long term. We should also ease the ability for people to get into those services. The assessment and referral process for substance use disorder treatment right now mean that people can frequently wait 4 to 5 days after presenting here in the community for assessment. If you've been using fentanyl for the last 20 years and you're asked to wait 5 days before you get into residential substance abuse treatment, it's unlikely that you're going to come back. So shrinking those referral times and providing more wraparound services, making sure that for people who are suffering from behavioral health issues or who have a substance use disorder, that we're providing them with the transportation services and the follow-up visits is important. Some of the things that we should be doing directly at the state level is increasing the Medicaid reimbursement rate, making it possible for the hospitals or for our federally qualified health centers to provide these services in a non-loss-making way. Right now, we have not created a set of incentives for the people in our healthcare system to provide these services. To provide them full stop. There's very few parts of the healthcare system where it makes sense for you to provide these basic preventative behavioral health care services. I think that having a capitated care model like the one Matt described would be fantastic. There's some great analogs to this in the Medicare space. PACE, for example. It's challenging to make any big shift to our behavioral health system. I think in general, shifting to capitated care, it would be great in the short term, making sure that we have strong advocates for increasing the amount of money that the state spends on the behavioral health providers in the community, and the behavioral health capacity in our community is important, and that's what I'm going to do if I get to Olympia.
All right. I regretted getting into that because I shortened up a little of the closing remarks. So I'm going to give each about a 1 minute closing. So here you go with a short one. Why should we vote for Adam Birnbaum?
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have me on. I'll be brief. I'm running because I want to be an advocate for the working families on the Olympic Peninsula. I think that there's a lot that we can do to increase people's economic opportunities here, to make sure that folks have access to well-paying jobs. And I think that that means taking a balanced approach. Like I said, I'm a pragmatist. I believe that we get the best solutions by working in a bipartisan way. I've got a ton of respect for Matt. And as you've heard from this interview, Matt and I think similarly about a lot of these issues. What I bring to the table is experience working in the state legislature, and also a firm commitment to being present in the community, to taking the time to build relationships with people so they both can educate me about what's most important in the community, and so I can be a strong advocate for them. And I think that's the reason why I enjoy the endorsements from a lot of folks who typically don't end up working together. I'm endorsed by the Washington State Labor Council and the Association of Washington Business. Those two groups seldom endorse any one candidate. I'm endorsed by WACOPS and the Farm Bureau and Planned Parenthood. That's the result of me spending a lot of time talking to groups in the community over the last several years who I think seldom want someone who's going to be a champion for their issues, but want someone who will listen. And that's what I promise to do. So thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Adam Birnbaum. Matt Roberson, a minute or so, why we should vote for you.
Yeah. Lived in this community, and I've fought for this community and community safety in the courtroom. I've been an advocate for this community, and I want to be your advocate in Olympia. I have professional experience keeping folks accountable, being a voice for the voiceless, and working to ensure folks get off the treatment. I have lived experience going through some of these issues myself as a kid, being homeless, and then now raising a family and dealing with the cost of housing and childcare. But I'm not the business as usual guy. There's a reason why those special interest groups and everybody else have endorsed my opponent. He is their candidate. He's the establishment guy. He's worked in Olympia for a few years. I want to change things because I don't think Olympia is working. We've had the same group in charge of the State House for 20 years, and I think it's time for a change, and I'd like to be an advocate for that change. Thank you.
All right. Matt Roberson, Adam Birnbaum, thank you both for coming in, spending some time with our listeners. And as I mentioned, the ballots went out yesterday. Should be arriving in your mailboxes in the next few days. You got some choices to make. We're going to take a break and check in with the news next.
This is the Todd Ortloff Show on Newsradio KONP.
I understand that as our world becomes more automated, receiving personalized service from a real person is more meaningful than ever. I'm Dan Shappy, and as a farmer's agent, I know a thing or two about how to help you select the insurance you want so you can
protect what matters most.
Call 360-681-0696 to learn more and chat with me, a real person and experienced farmer's agent, today.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Underwritten by Farmers Truck Fire Insurance Exchanges and Affiliates. Products not available in every state.
Red Carpet Car Wash in Carlsberg is always adding to the list of things they provide to keep your vehicle looking brand new. The full detail shop is just one more service to check off that list. Not only will your interior and exterior shine, your engine will sparkle too. Red Carpet is also getting some winter upgrades, including new equipment in the manual bay and new vacuums. Call Kyle today and let him get you scheduled for your red carpet treatment Tuesday through Saturday. 360-461-0826.
I'm Steve Theringer, and it's been an honor to be your state representative, working with you to fund education, strengthening the healthcare system, making investments in our ports and parks, promoting new forest products. We need to improve access to healthcare, improve long-term care, protect our environment while growing our economy. By working together at the state and local level, we can build thriving communities to help our families flourish. I ask for your vote to continue working with you to make the Olympic Peninsula an even better place to live. Paid for by Theringer for State Representative, Democrat.
Welcome to Volunteer Spotlight, sponsored this time by Brown's Outdoor. This is Alan Barnard, and this Volunteer Spotlight shines on Rita Marston, a volunteer at the Port Angeles Visitor Center. Her fellow volunteers tell me that Rita is always cheerful and excellent at handling all situations. She tends to needed materials for staff, mails out information requests, and keeps visitors and local information, maps, and attractions stocked, and always knows where to find answers for all who ask. In short, Rita Marston is that go-to person at the core of the Visitor Center, putting Port Angeles' best foot forward for our visitors. If you know a person or group you feel deserves this spotlight for their volunteer work, email info@radio-pacific.com. It's said that service is the rent we pay for our space on Earth. That's why we present this volunteer spotlight, brought to you by Brown's Outdoor, serving your family for over 100 years.
Here's why voting yes on both the upcoming school levy and bond measures is easy. The levy pays for all sports, all music, most paraeducators, and supports core school operations. We've renewed it since the 60s, and it's critical. Now, the bond does not add extra taxes. It simply continues the plan. It's phase 2 of a disciplined 30-year plan to renew all our schools. So far, the plan is on time and on budget, so saying yes is easy. Paid for by Port Angeles Citizens for Education.
I'm speaking with PUD Commissioner Phyllis Bernard. Phyllis, what is the essential role of the PUD here in Clallam County?